Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
This is the Networking RX podcast. I am your host, Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. If you were listening a couple of weeks ago, it was actually episode 197, came out on July 30th. We had a conversation with Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. It's a mouthful, and if you want the spelling, it's in the show notes, and all his information's in the show notes. It was an interesting article. Gleb is a cognitive neuroscientist, and he helps companies. He was a professor for a number of years. He's written a number of books. The book we talked about was The Blind Spots Between Us, and he has another book out there called Don't Go With Your Gut. But again, all that information is in those show notes. But what I really wanted to touch on and spend a little more time talking about were two things that he had mentioned, and they're really kind of related. It's the horns effect and the halo effect. And quite simply, I mean, they're simple to understand, but I don't think we really realize how much they play a part in our world. They really do. So just, I guess, some background on these two. The halo effect, and I'm reading this from Dr. Tsipursky's book, The Blind Spots Between Us, halo effect. In this cognitive bias, when we feel a strong liking for one characteristic of someone, especially a trait that makes us feel like they're a part of a group which we have a clear tribal affiliation, we will tend to have an excessively positive opinion of the person's other characteristics. And the horns effect, which is essentially the opposite, this cognitive bias refers to the fact that if we don't like some aspect of a person, particularly one that puts the individual in a group at odds with one to which we feel connected, we will evaluate that individual too harshly. And in our interview, he talked about the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. And that's certainly one example. And you can kind of point to it and chuckle and say, oh, it's just a football game. And it is. It's true. But he talked about it in that people who are Ohio State Buckeye fans or people who are Michigan Wolverine fans really have a dislike for someone in the other fan base. They just do. And that kind of extends to all the things about the Michigan Wolverine fan or the Ohio State Buckeye fan. And it can be quite comical. In fact, he shared the story that he was at he was doing a program with a group of corporate execs involved with diversity and inclusion at various large companies in the Columbus, Ohio area, and asked them, presumably most of those people who were Ohio State Buckeye fans, asked them how many of you would hire a Michigan Wolverine, a fan of Michigan, or a Michigan grad. And only 3% of the people said they would, which was comical because here's a group of people who are, clearly all about inclusion, making sure that, we don't have any discrimination with respect to race, anything with gender. We just treat people as people. And their indication was that they would have nothing to do with a Michigan grad or a Michigan fan, which is, either way is kind of comical because I know people on both fan bases, and people are people. They love their kids the same. Their marriages are the same. Some are great, some fail. People are people, and it's really kind of interesting to watch these things, and we certainly see it in politics and just how people treat one another. It certainly has seemed that Donald Trump has taken his fair share of lumps. Arguably, he's deserved them. I'm not terribly pro left or right, but to watch, there is a lot going on anytime Donald Trump tweets or says something, and I'm of the opinion, jokingly of the opinion, that the news organizations hope that he gets reelected because he's great for business. He's always has something to lead the headlines. But the interesting thing is, and it's not just with Donald Trump, but you saw it with Barack Obama, you saw it with George W. Bush, you saw it with Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan. You see presidents doing similar things and being treated differently by people. Border security. You know, if Barack Obama had said something with respect to border security, then there are certainly people on the left that would have been like, hey, yeah, great, we need to do this. But the moment Donald Trump does it, then the people on the left have a totally different opinion of it. Now, I know there are people on the left who will take me to task on this and say, well, it's different. Arguably, it is different. Today is a Monday, tomorrow will be a Tuesday. Things are always different. I get it. But you look and we see things that people say, and they are taken differently depending upon whether we like them or don't like them. And I think if you're honest with yourself, I mean, really honest with yourself, and you stop and look at, getting politics aside and college football aside, but if you stop and take a look at the people who are in your life, there are certain people in your life that rise to a different level of respect. And if they don't return your email, you might turn a blind eye to that or just think, okay, that person's busy. You'll make an excuse for them. Whereas if it's somebody who you don't care for that much, that might really bother you. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he has not returned my email. It's been a week. Nobody can possibly be that busy. And I think we're all guilty of that. We're all guilty of applying the halo and the horns effect. I know we're all guilty. Gleb, Dr. Tsipursky, when he was on, he admitted, I fall victim to these biases. But by his own admission, he's somebody who studies them. He's somebody who spots them every day. And he admits, I am a victim of these. I'm only human. These are part of our tribal mind back when we actually lived in tribes. And he's admitting to that. And so if he could admit it, somebody who actually studies it knows that he succumbs to these things, then it really has application to us all. We all suffer from the horns effect and the halo effect. I know I do. And it's something I need to work on because it's really not fair to the people. I need to just look at people as people and take a step back and say, okay, you know what? They're not returning my email. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps they are busy. Or it might be somebody who is, who's benefiting from the halo effect and maybe taking them to task in a polite way and saying, listen, I sent you an email a week ago. I would appreciate a response. It really holds me up from doing the things that I need to do when I'm waiting on you. In other words, kind of bringing the horns, the people who are suffering from the horns effect and people who are suffering from the halo effect a little closer together in my treatment. Maybe it's never totally equal. I don't know that it ever can be, but try to make them more equitable. Now, the point to all of this between the horns effect and the halo effect is, and I've said this in other podcasts, knowing that these biases are out there, knowing that there is the horns effect, looking at somebody we dislike and thinking all their characteristics are despicable, or looking at somebody we like for whatever reason and thinking everything about them was wonderful. Isn't that great? Yeah. What we need to try and do is, and this is in particular the people who we apply the horns effect to, is try and find a way to like them. Go out of your way and look at somebody who you may not necessarily like and say, you know what, let me stop and think about them and let me think of something, whatever it might be, that can so-called pull them into my tribe. What do we have in common? What is it about them and me that gives us something in common, something I can like them about? Because if you can latch onto that, then you can start to look for other things. So you might say, okay, you know what? They've got kids, I've got kids. And if you're somebody out there with kids, if you're listening, you have kids, you know raising kids is not easy. And the fact that they've raised kids or are raising kids, kind of, if nothing else, gives you something to joke about. We all have stories. Caring for an elderly parent or starting a business. That's always an easy one for me in the AmSpirit Business Connections world because whoever I come across is some sort of entrepreneur. They might be working for a company, but they're really some sort of entrepreneur because they're driving a bottom line. They're working perhaps on commission only, and that's a hard thing. It's they're not relying on a paycheck. Well, they are relying on a paycheck, but it's not a guaranteed paycheck. No matter what, they've got to earn everything that they get for the most part. Um, and so knowing that alone should give me some affinity towards them. Hey, we're in a tribe together. We're in an entrepreneurial tribe. Whatever it might be, you know, maybe it's fandom. Maybe it has to do with sports. Maybe it has to do with where somebody grows up. Maybe it's their personal situation. Maybe it's just what they like to be involved in with respect to charity. I find myself finding out how involved some people are in charity. I might be indifferent to them, or I might not like them, and then I find out that they're really knee deep in a charity they're really passionate about. And it might not be something I'm passionate about, but the fact that they are passionate about something and helping others kind of puts them in a tribe with me, and I find that I've become more liking of them. I've become more tolerant of all the things about them. And I think it's an important exercise for us to do is to really take those people who are not necessarily on our good list and stop and one by one go through and say, okay, what about these people do I really like? What about these people can I try and do a better job of searching for the things that will help me like them, will demonstrate my liking towards them? Because once you start doing those things and kind of moving that needle in the right direction, you'll find more and more things, and they'll probably behave in a different way to give you more things, and it just becomes cyclical, and you can like them more, and then when you see the things that you might not tolerate, you you can be more forgiving of them. So just something to think about with respect to the horns and the halo effect. Again, the horns effect is a situation where when there's an attribute about somebody that you dislike, you dislike them, you are prone to dislike all the things about them. And then the halo effect is just the opposite. When there are things about somebody that you like, then you're really prone to liking everything about them. And again, it's again, I keep going back to politics because it's such a great petri dish to kind of examine and see. I know some really, really great people that I really admire that are just totally against Donald Trump, and anything he says or does is just horse manure. And then I know some people that I really, really like and admire, and I would put those two people in the same boat as great people, of all-time great people in my life. And they look at Donald Trump totally opposite. He can do no wrong. And it's just the horns effect and the halo effect. And it's no different than when you're at a sporting event and you see two fandoms. High school soccer. I've seen a lot of high school soccer. Something happens in the game, and you see one set of parents sitting next to another set of parents from each side, and they see the exact same thing, almost from the exact same angle, and they see it differently. One sees a horrible transgression, and the other sees nothing wrong. And it's just, and the truth, probably the referee saw the truth because the referee is somewhat unbiased or should be unbiased. But then maybe not. The referee might be suffering from this as well. Maybe the referee has got an issue with one of the coaches and likes the other coach, or likes one coach and is indifferent to the other. So who knows? But just know that this horns effect and this halo effect are at play with everything you do, each and every day. To wrap up, remember, AmSpirit Business Connections has a unique franchise opportunity that involves helping small business professionals become successful through a referral-based networking program. It only involves a couple hours a day, a few days a week, and would be a great franchise for somebody to add on to what they're already doing. All of our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, they're doing the AmSpirit thing the rest of their time. They are attorneys, accountants, realtors, business coaches, consultants. It runs the gamut. Anyhow, why just be a renter when you can own the building? Why just be in a networking group when you can own the networking group or groups? If you or someone you know would like to learn more, please contact me using the email we put in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of the podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connections. All rights reserved.